Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Having a conversation with someone that disagrees with you could be the beginning of a difficult situation. At the same time, it could be a relationship builder. I know that's hard to believe, which is why Bill and I have dedicated a complete episode to managing conflict and other great ideas on episode 477 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Well, not quite a full episode, Scott. We're going to still do our book club.
Well, that's true. That's true.
But I think it's important to make sure that we keep moving through this book. This is a really good book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. We're finishing habit 2, begin with the end in mind. And this one was a little bit of work because what he's doing is saying you need to prepare and do a personal mission statement. I do want to talk to these different aspects again of centeredness. So we talked about the centeredness, spouse, family, money, centeredness. We talked about that a little bit last week, but he also then said, let's dive really deep into each of these and what it means to our security, to how we guide ourselves, to wisdom, and to the power that we get from it. And, if you want to feel kind of ashamed of yourself, read through this section.
That's one way of interpreting it, but it's reflective. It's a reflective section.
Well, I know he's going to say you can't be centeredness into these areas, right? So he's not judging, but you get the feeling that you're being judged if you're centered too much in one of these areas, because when he talks about security, guidance, wisdom, and power, he's not talking positively about these being positive centeredness. Would you agree with that?
I would. And I think we need to, the listeners, and I'm included in that, need to look at what kind of results are we getting from the actions that we have with other people. And if we're not getting the favorable outcomes and the favorable results, or we don't feel good about it for one reason or another, we need to look at where was the emphasis on the conversation? What could I do different if I had a chance? And to go from there.
Right. And I think that's what he's trying to do, not just with a conversation or one relationship, but it's with your whole life.
Yeah.
How are you centering your life? And is that a positive way to center it? And while he's being fairly non-judgmental in this, we should be judgmental on ourselves. We've gotten into this mode, I think, in our world of everything's great and just accept everything and just this is the way I am. And that's a total load of crap.
Right.
If you're not trying to get better in your life, you're probably getting worse. And what you are probably isn't good enough. And so you need to start taking some time to try to figure out how you could improve yourself. And I'm a big believer in a little bit of shame goes a long way. And I should be ashamed of myself if I'm self-centered, if I'm only focused on money or some of these other aspects. There's a lot more to the world than just one aspect of your life. And so that's probably what I saw myself. I'm a little bit money oriented. I'm a little bit too family oriented sometimes. I'm a little bit too self-centered sometimes. And I think that's what he's trying to show you, is that all of these in the right measure can be positive, but what he's going to talk about is being principle centered. And then that brings all of the other possible centers like spouse and family and money into alignment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think sometimes when we focus on something, and it's negative, we end up attracting it. And I think when we fear something, we end up focusing on it. And the brain cannot negate positive and negative. So if we're going to fear something, we need to be aware of it, but also focus on the opportunity. I've been working with, some people that are working on making decisions about in the future of getting a house or getting an office, and they're very fear-centered versus opportunity-focused. And I see this in the mindset. I'm going, you're basing a lot of your actions based on the past and fear versus the future and opportunities. And just take it into contrast. You need to compare them both before you do that.
Well, I think too, though, that, once burned, twice shy. And when we talk about maybe a house, we're talking about probably the biggest investment anybody will make in their entire lives. And so I think to tread cautiously sometimes, if you only think about the positive possibilities, Well, that's a good way to lose money sometimes. Of course, my dad was an Eeyore, so he only saw the
Yeah,
negative
right.
opportunities. And so that was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. So you brought up principles, and there's one line in the book, and I highlighted it, and it's our self-awareness empowers us to examine our own thoughts and to be really reflective on our own thoughts. And I think that this is kind of the chapter of, in using your brain. And they talked a little bit about that, and Abraham Maslow's line of, he that is good with a hammer tends to think that everything is a nail, and
Yep, that's
we
an
see things. Yeah,
old training saw. If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
right.
So
So we can get centered on one thing when we need to widen our perspective
yeah,
of it too.
you mentioned that line about the ability to look at ourselves critically. And I think early in the whole book, he talks about that being the thing that separates us from all other animals,
Mm-hmm.
is our ability to have introspection. And so looking at these different kinds of centeredness and introspecting and seeing that those aren't positive if overdone too much brings us to this principle centeredness, which he didn't really say what those principles should be. Perhaps he will talk about that a little bit more, but what it really led into is developing a personal mission statement, a
Mm-hmm.
mission statement that may include spouse and family and money, but a mission statement then that says, here's the lens I'm going to put up. Go into any company who claims to have a personal mission statement or a company mission statement and ask anybody what it is. Even the CEO will usually not know what it is.
Right. It's framed up in the lobby for
That's
everybody
right.
else to see. But
That's right.
I heard one speaker say, a mission statement is where you want to be. It's not where you are and who you are. And you need to really concentrate, I think, on who you are and where you are today, right now. What are you delivering today versus, well, this is our 5-year mission statement and this is where we're going, until you get punched in the face. That's a great plan.
That's right.
In the words of Mike Tyson.
Yeah, everybody's got a plan.
Yeah. But I think it's really important to focus on what are you committed to right now. And I've argued with people about, where do you put your emphasis? Do you put your emphasis on commitment, or do you put your emphasis on consistency? And some people will say, well, consistency is important. I said, what happens if you're 5 minutes late? I know people that are 20 minutes late to a meeting. Every time there's a meeting with a group, they're always 20 minutes late. Well, at least they're consistent. No. How committed are they to attending the meeting on time? And I really believe that commitment trumps consistency.
I think committed and consistency have to go hand in hand. I can claim commitment, but if I don't do anything about it,
True.
It doesn't matter. And if I am committed to something, but I don't do it often enough to make change, it's not going to do anything either. I think the personal mission statement is both what I'm doing now, but also what I intend to do in the future. To me, it's a vacuum. It's the draw that says, if I talk about this enough, I can become this, even if I'm not at that place right now.
Right. That's a good point. I love the topic of affirmations. He brought up a good affirmations has 5 basic ingredients. It's personal, it's positive, it's present tense, it's visual, and it's emotional. And I love a good affirmation where you can just kind of feel it. And that's the emotional part of an affirmation, and to focus on that. And you think about, when is the most important time of seeing affirmations? It's really when you're just falling asleep at night and when you're waking up in the morning. It's when the brain is most open to messages. And if you remember that time, when we're falling asleep and when we're waking up, our brains are kind of in this different state, which is, really enjoyable, which is why I don't like getting out of bed some mornings, because it's really enjoyable.
Well, I know you're a reader of The Greatest Salesman, which was all affirmation-based book.
Right.
And he had you read it 3 times a day. Or memorize it and say it 3 or 4 or 5. And everybody that I know that really does good affirmations, they have them in their pocket. They're ready to say them anytime, before they go into an appointment, before they have a discussion, at lunchtime. They're saying those affirmations to make them come true and to remind themselves always of what they are.
And some people may think of that as Pollyannish, but I think you really got to commit to something and focus on it. Otherwise, you're susceptible to everything that you come in contact with. And we need to be able to have that contrast to things that are important and not things that are a distraction. And we can get bombarded with distractions all during the day. But if we don't have something to focus on, we end up focusing on other things that don't support the goal. And affirmations really can keep us on track and really counter, 85% of our self-talk is negative. I mean, that's terrible. Right. When we talk to ourselves, what are we really saying to ourselves? And that's why we need, affirmations.
Which is why you should read or say your affirmations out loud, because you won't have the kickback. If I say something positive in my mind, it'll sound something like this: I'm going to work really hard today. Oh, you're lazy.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's just in my, but if I say it out loud, I won't say that I know you're lazy out loud. I'm going to work really hard today. It's going to be a great day. I'm going to make a lot of phone calls. I enjoy making phone calls. Whatever those affirmations are for you, say them out loud, and then you hear them, and then you can get the emotions happening in them, and you won't get the "no, you're not, you lazy bum" blowback that you get when you say them to yourself. Yeah. So personal mission statement, create some affirmations. That's really what we learned from this chapter. Any last thoughts, Scott?
No, I look at where I am in the book, and I'm on principle 2, and I feel like I'm halfway through the book. So, I mean, the other ones I think are going to get a little thinner.
Well, they're not. Habit 3 is 40 pages again. So we'll do Habit 3 in 2 sections as well next time. All right.
Yeah.
This segment of the Winning at Selling podcast is brought to you by The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door by Steve Kloida. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer. And the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
So our topic today is managing conflict. And this always seems
to be... Oh, you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I know. I'm confused.
I want to make this really conflicted.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm going to create conflict here.
And that response doesn't create conflict. Oh, you're probably right. Well, who gives you the right? Who do you think, what do you know? And it's like, you're probably right. I don't know what I'm talking about. Then there's no conflict. There's more submission, but that's not what we're really talking about.
I heard an old Dale Carnegie thing. It was used to say, if somebody says something to you, say, you very well may be right.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that you're right or that you might be right. It's like, it's like, oh, yeah. So it does take away the conflict.
And or you just respond with interesting, and you become very perspective on it, going, how did you come upon that conclusion? I'm kind of curious. You separate yourself from it. You become a third party in the conversation, and you don't work against yourself, but you don't feel like you need to defend yourself either. But that's a little off topic on,
what kind of conflicts do you find people get into in the sales environment?
Well,
not just with their boss, but with their
I think sometimes objections can be interpreted as conflict. I think probably the biggest objection salespeople deal with is price, or salespeople are kind of getting pushed around like a hockey puck on a skating rink with who to talk to, and they get deflected, and they end up talking to the wrong people, or they're not getting all the information. So that can create a difficult conversation too.
Perhaps we find out that somebody gave us wrong information. Or we gave wrong information accidentally, and now we have to go back in and deal with that.
But if we think about the biggest weakness that salespeople have, it's a high need for approval. So now salespeople are aware of that, and they go, well, I want people to like me. So, okay. So what happens if they don't like you? Well, now you're engaging in conflict. So if they're not prepared to have a perspective on conflict, they're going to strive to be liked and not earn the respect of the prospect. So is this prospect really going to be able to count on a salesperson to go through a change? And I really believe that, as a salesperson working with prospects, if we don't challenge them, we don't change them. And Bill and I did a book on the challenger sale. That's really the challenger mentality of a salesperson, is to challenge a prospect. But in some cases, it may create conflict. Now, keep in mind, and we've heard this all before, is that people buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually. Okay, well, if a prospect is upset Is that good or bad? Well, interesting enough, it could be good, because what are they really frustrated at? They're probably frustrated at their current situation, that they're not getting the response that they want, or the reaction or the outcome, and they're talking to somebody that can fix the problem. So are they in an emotional state if they're upset? Absolutely. Do people buy emotionally? Yes. And they just justify it intellectually. Great. We're there. So conflict is really uh, an engagement and an activity of two people in the pursuit of truth. It really boils down to perspective as to what is truth.
Well, you said earlier that we want to be liked. I do want to be liked, but I also want to be respected, and I want that. I want that likeness. I want that relationship built on the fact that they respect that I'm honest with them, and that I will work on their behalf, and I know what I'm talking about, and I can solve their problem. And then that likingness, that agreeableness doesn't come out wrong. It comes out as you say in the Challenger sale, versus just doing things. Oh, I'll take you to the ball game. I'll buy you lunch. And that wears off really quick, because I don't really want to go to the ball game with you, because I don't really respect you. I might like you, but you're not taking me anywhere, and I still have to do business. So I think that's where a lot of conflict can start too, is that if I'm not doing my work as a salesperson, I can create conflict, even though I'm taking them out to lunch or taking them to a ball game or being a really nice person.
And that's another perspective of conflict is two people being completely honest with one another too. If you don't want to go to the ball game and you're telling me that you don't want to go to a ball game for one reason or another, I'm grateful that you're being honest with me. It's when you say, hey, okay, I'll go to a ball game, and then you're miserable the whole time because you didn't say no and you didn't want to engage in conflict. So I think sometimes we can become submissive, and we can do something that, we're going to be an Eeyore at, and we're going to be miserable during the entire time. And we're going to share that with the other person because we didn't engage in conflict as to what we felt or what we wanted to do or what we didn't want to do.
Right. Being truthful with people sometimes is difficult, and you don't have to be brutally honest, but being honest is important.
Yeah. And, sometimes when you engage in conflict, you can be tossing a hand grenade over to the other side.
Well, tell me what you mean by that.
Well, when you get into, and I'm reading a great book right now called Difficult Conversations, and it's a great book. It's on negotiations, but it's also about how do you really break a difficult conversation down into three parts. And the first part is you think about and discuss what happened in the conversation, and you've got your perspective, you've got the other person's perspective, and you have how they interpreted your words and how you interpreted their words. So, the first part is what happened. The second part is the feeling conversation, is to, do I feel upset or angry or hurt, or am I more upset, or do I need to be defensive? And then the third part is the identity conversation, is, am I wrong? Am I incompetent? Do I not know this? Should I not talk about this? Should I do something else? Should I go backwards in my career instead of going forwards in my career? So when we break down our difficult conversations in those three areas, and that's the premise of what the book is about, it really identifies the area that we need to be reflective on as to what happened, the feelings about what happened, and then the identity of, how do we feel about ourselves, and are we competent or incompetent? And that's another, perspective. I read another book called.
Well, let's go back and let's examine this a little bit before we go on to that other book, because
okay.
When you have a difficult conversation that you're talking about, somebody has to initiate it.
Right.
What happens a lot is avoidance, and I looked at some of the things that cause these problems to get worse. And one of the key things that causes a problem or a conflict to get worse is to try to avoid it. Is that we try to blame others. We try to play the blame game and put it on someone else, or the customer, or somebody. The worst thing I hear is someone else at our company. So maybe there's something that's late, and I say, well, that's because our shipping department is. Well,
right.
Customer doesn't see the shipping department different from you, different from the CEO. It's just blaming somebody for what they're doing, trying to take the pressure off yourself, but it really puts it elsewhere on the company, which you're reflective on as well. I don't think we can use anytime we try to use ultimatums, you do this or else,
right,
sort of thing. It makes these problems worse. And then if we try to go around this person too soon, or go over
Mm.
them or around
Hmm.
them and work with somebody else before we've really had, as you say, that difficult conversation. We're just going to make it worse, because we can't have these good things that you talked about in this conversation. What happened? How are you feeling about it? And what does this mean to all of us? That can't happen if you start to go around them and you just make negative feelings start to happen. So
Hmm.
I'm always trying to be careful about being the first to initiate it, being brave enough to initiate the conversation and go, listen, Larry, I know we're having problems. Let's sit down and talk this out so we can. And it's amazing just the relief people will feel if you're brave enough to do that.
Right. I think a great transitional statement or question is, we need to have a conversation about expectations. And I think sometimes the disappointment is a false sense of expectations, or the expectations are not clear, or the
Mhm.
interpretation of the expectations
It's
are,
almost always interpretation.
yeah, yeah.
What did you mean? What did I think you mean? I thought you meant this because I wanted you to mean that, right?
Hmm.
So, and sometimes when we're talking, we're a little bit obscure in what we're saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're purposely unclear so that we don't get trapped, and
Right.
then
Oh,
that comes
true.
back to bite us a little bit later.
Yeah, yeah, true. I had a situation many, many years ago where I needed some work done on a Chevy Blazer. And on Tuesday, I made an appointment with the dealership for Saturday at 7 a.m. And I showed up at Saturday at 7 a.m. I was the first one in line. I was there before the door opened. The door opened. I drive in. I talked to the sales advisor. Dan was his name, and I said, Dan, I got an appointment here, and I'm got some stuff. He goes, yep, I got it. And I said, how long will it take? And he said, about 2 hours. I said, okay. And then he asked, are you going to wait here, or are you going to go? I said, I got some errands to run. I'll go. He says, okay, we'll call you when it's done. I said, fabulous. 11 o'clock, I call and I say, hey, Dan, how's that going? He says, well, we haven't started on it. I go, oh, okay. He said, and I'll call you when it's done. I said, oh, okay. 2 o'clock, I show up at the dealership and I see Dan. I go, Dan, I'm here to pick up my truck. He says,
Mhm.
we haven't started on it. I told you that I would call you when it's done. I said, Dan, let me understand what happened today. And he said, well, these people over here are waiting for their vehicle. And I said, these people over here waiting for their vehicle, make an appointment with you, show up on time. You accepted the appointment? No. And they're given a higher priority than me, who has respect for you and your time so you can manage your resources and your labor, etc. And I show up on time and you tell me it's going to take 2 hours. You're going to treat those people with a higher respect and a higher priority than me? Is that the way it works around here? He says, you make a good point. We'll get started on it right now and we'll call you when it's done. I go, I'm going to wait.
That's right.
Okay.
I
I'm
found the
going to wait.
program. I got to
Yeah.
sit in the lobby and look at you.
So, yeah, I get there, and they close at 4 o'clock. And of course, I'm one of the last ones there. I was
Yeah.
the first one there in the morning. I'm in the last one in the afternoon. And my bill was like $500. And he said, let me see if we can do something about this. We got this VIP discount, this gold membership, this. It got down to $100. And I tell you, that conversation that Dan and I had built a very strong relationship of trust between the two of us.
Right.
Because we understood each other's expectations, or I understood the game and he understood what I was expecting from him. And every time I went in there, I always asked for him. I always worked with him, and I always believed him every time he said something needed to be done on that old truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the beginning of a great relationship. And when he left that dealership, I followed him to another dealership because he took care of me. We started our relationship based on conflict, and that can be a great outcome of conflict and an honest conversation with each other.
That's right. That's right. I like to think about the mental game too. A lot of times we get ourselves mentally balled up when we're trying to have these conversations, and we try to. So there's three things I like to do. Number one, forget the past mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't keep bringing up, hey, this happened 3 years ago, and this happened. We already resolved all those conflicts. Quit piling on with these things that happen and have been resolved. This challenge, this conflict is in and of itself. So let's forget about those and not just draw up these things to make it seem worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that another important thing to do is to try and see it from their side and see if you can see a broader aspect. And I think that's what you did with Dan. Was you said, look, I know you're feeling pressure from these people who are sitting here, but that's not fair to me. Look at from my side.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then what you did also was you kept the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
You didn't start using you and you did this and this happened and you made, you didn't get all emotional. You said, let's look at this logically. Let's look at this and try to see it in how I feel and how you've disrespected me. And when you did that, he could open up a little bit more rather than feeling defensive. Because once we put people on the defensive by getting emotional or blaming them or bringing up a lot of past stuff, then they're going to start to fight. If we go at them with our fists all balled up, they're going to come back at us the same way.
I think you bring up a really great point. And the essence, I think, of everything that you just mentioned is an environment where somebody feels safe. It's not generally the content of what you say, it's the condition and how and what you say. So it's creating an unsafeness in the conversation where people now have to get defensive and prepared, fight or flight, and in the conversation, when in reality you want to try to keep the guard down and you want to have a conversation, and to do it in a respectful way where you gain something when it's all over with. It creates a stronger relationship when it's done with.
Yeah. I just think it's so important to really think about that other person and how they're feeling. And one of the things I try to do is be willing to apologize.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, you know what? I apologize if I was wrong in what I was thinking. When you said it was going to take 2 hours, I thought you were going to start it right away and it would be done in 2 hours. Did I mistake that?
Right.
Did I read that wrong? And give them a chance to go, oh, well, I always heard that if you get stopped for speeding, throw yourself on the mercy of the policeman. Oh, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I sped. I must be the worst criminal you saw today. And if you beat yourself up a little bit, then they're going to be a little bit more willing to go, no. It's just a lot of people go too fast here. And, let's just, so give that other person a chance to be the bigger person and accept your apology and move things forward. And then I think the other thing you talked about was to discuss behaviors and not motivation. One of the things I think we really make a mistake at when we think about other people is we think all of our motives are pure and all of their motives are evil. This is something I see in the political discussion right now. If you don't like something, well, you're trying to kill babies and old people.
Right.
And that was your motivation, was to kill babies. And so wait, how did that come? But that's thrown in people's faces all the time. Or you hate our country. That's why you're believing that. So let's not talk about what motivates you, because you don't know what motivates me. Let's talk about your behavior, what you said, what you did, your action of not starting my car on time. That showed me a great deal of disrespect. And that made me wonder if I'm valuable to this organization.
Yeah. I think sometimes when somebody comes to you and they're upset, the first thing to do is not feel like you need to become defensive or fight back right away, but rather express some gratitude. I really appreciate you bringing that up to me. And I really appreciate you sharing your feelings with me. And if I offended you, that was not my intent. It was not my intent. Now, if I said something, which is the content that was offensive, I apologize for that. But I might have use the wrong words in expressing an idea or an intent. So I apologize for that. Can we start over? Will you give me another chance?
Right.
And if they say, sure, go ahead. Now, you've got a clean slate. I mean, you mentioned earlier is past failures. If you're asking a person for forgiveness and they've granted forgiveness, they should have forgotten what that was, whatever you did.
Or we assume they've forgotten it.
Well, when they bring it up again, I think that needs to be readdressed. And I said, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I thought we talked about that and you forgave me. It doesn't sound like you forgave me for that mistake that I did in the past. Is that safe to say? Well, I said, let's talk about that. Let's go back there and let's figure that out again. Because when I forgive you, I'm forgetting about it. I don't want to have it between us. I am burying it in the backyard. I don't ever want to see it again. And hopefully I won't see it again, period, whatever it is.
Right.
But we just, and, you mentioned earlier about, we can't get into name calling. We can't get into generalizing. We can't always say, you always do this or you never do that. Well,
correct.
And start off with saying, I feel like this when this happens. And now you're talking about your feelings, which, guys, I know we have a tough time talking about our feelings. We have a tough time describing them and expressing them and sharing what we want. But focus on the feelings and not necessarily the actions. well, maybe that's not a safe thing to say, because I think sometimes the actions again represent the intent, but maybe that's the essence, is the intent versus the actions.
Right.
I mean, people judge us on our actions. We judge ourselves based on our intent. And sometimes we screw up with our actions, and we need to take responsibility for that.
Well, again, and we want to be forgiven because we didn't have bad intent. So if we're foisting bad intent on everybody, then it's hard to forgive them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
I don't know if I talked in a circle or not, but hopefully it gave our listeners something to think about.
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation. Scott, I do have a video that I did on this. It's one of my most popular videos. It's called Working More Effectively with Others, and we'll put a link up to it on our webpage.
Yeah, absolutely. This segment is brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by your hosts of the Winning at Selling podcast. Every professional athlete has a coach, someone to assist and advise. Tiger Woods had 4 swing coaches so that he could stay at the top of his game. What would you like to improve or overcome in the next year? Perhaps as a salesperson, you want to be more productive with your prospecting, overcoming objections, or delivering more effective presentations. As a sales manager, you want to create a spark within your sales team with a new message, a refreshed approach to starting new conversations with the prospects, or you are looking for market-ready strategies to increase revenue and shorten the sales cycle with your existing team. Or as a business leader, you want to transform the sales culture and your value proposition for the new marketplace. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why your hosts of Winning at Selling podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Now you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. Go to winningatselling.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself, your people, and your customers, and invest in your future.
Well, as we finish up today, we have a golden nugget. This one comes from one of my favorite authors. I taught their training for about 5 or 6 years, from Dale Carnegie. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive.
Right. Beehives and pink-colored grenades, I think. I don't care what color the grenade is. If you're tossing it over the fence, it's going to blow.
That's right. That's right. And it's so amazing the things that people say to each other and don't expect to have bad results from them.
Right.
So don't go in there with guns blazing, because you're not going to get what you want.
Exactly. Everything that we talked about is at winningatselling.com.
Next week, our book club is chapter 3, or habit 3. I'm sorry, it's not really in chapters. Habit 3, the first 20 pages or so of that, put first things first. And then our topic is going to be questions that we've gotten recently from our listeners. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.